friends, this is Christopher davis-shannon, and today I'm going to show you 3 different ways to play the triple stroke. We're going to work on the thumb roll, which many of you are likely familiar with, the index finger triple, as well as the Cascade Triple, which you might not have played before. We're going to apply this to one rhythmic concept throughout the entire video, but then at the very end I'm going to talk about some ways that we can utilize the triple stroke outside of a standard triplet context. So first things first is for this entire lesson, we're going to be utilizing the B section of Ernest Caillet's Loke Lani as a harmonic vehicle to demonstrate each of these triple techniques. This is a very easy tune and is rhythmically consistent through each measure. So first things first, there are 3 beats in each measure, and let's look at the rhythm first. You can see we have a quarter note, and then 3 notes for an 8th note triplet, which is where our triple stroke will lie, and then another quarter note. So the rhythm, if we clap it, will sound like this. It'll be 1, triplet, 3, 1, triplet, 3, throughout the entire section. Now, as far as chords, we don't have too much to do, and I've left out the melodic movement here. I will have it in the tabs as we do the play-alongs, but just worry about the chords. We want to focus on the right-hand techniques right now. So we're going to have 2 measures of F, and then go to 2 measures of C major, 2 measures of G7, and right on back to C for 2 more measures. And this last one can be a C7th, as we will ultimately loop back around to an F. So now that we have the chords that we need for this lesson, let's jump into those triple strokes. So the first triplet variation we need to talk about is probably the most popular and likely one you've already played before. This is the thumb roll triple. And the first question is, well, what is it? So it's a very easy triplet pattern where we come down with the nail of our first finger, follow through with the pad of our thumb, and then up with the pad of our first finger. So if we put this in context of the rhythm we were talking about, our quarter note, and then a triplet, and then another quarter note, it'll sound like this. So the question is, why is this the most popular? And it's really for 2 specific reasons. The first is that if you note with the wrist motion that we use to play this triplet, it's identical to the down and up strum that we usually play. So we don't need to use any awkward wrist motions in executing this strum. But the second thing is probably the most important, and that's because we lead with the nail of our first finger. And this gives us a natural accent on the downbeat, right on beat 2 in this case, with softer upbeats, the last 2 notes of the triplet coming down with the pad of the thumb and then up with the first finger. We hear a nice loud first downbeat, and then we have a very relaxed and soft offbeat for those next 2 notes. And that is instinctively what our ear really wants to hear. So let's listen to this in the context of the Ernest Caillet song. And again, I'm just going to play the chords for this, but in the tabs in 1 second, we'll have the melodic movement in there as well if you want to add it in. So again, the rhythm is exactly the same for every measure. We start out on F major chord. Now let's try that together, and again, I'll have the melodic movement in there in case you want to play those extra melody notes. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now the thing is, in the original scores for Loke Lani, this is not the triplet that Ernest Caillet wanted you to play. What he played is what we call the index finger triplet. For the Form B style players out there, we call it the shake. It's the same exact thing, and it's exactly what it sounds like. Instead of executing this with 2 fingers, right, because we have index, thumb, index again, we're going to do the entire triplet with just our first finger. So it'll sound like this. Now, what's the difference between this? So we talked previously about the wrist motion. So this actually sets us up. Instead of having a strong down strum on beat 3, which is a weak beat in a waltz, we are having a nice soft up strum while still accentuating that first note of the triplet, that first downbeat. Now the downside to this triplet is exactly what makes the thumb roll triplet so nice and easy to play, is we do actually have to move the wrist faster as we do the index finger triplet. So a couple tips for this triplet, because we have to speed it up. You might find that you have to actually put your finger in a little bit more. I like to play this very, very lightly with the tip of my finger, also utilizing just a little bit of the nail, but I actually change my nail angle a little bit to point closer to the neck of the instrument, straight across, as opposed to like this where it's hitting the side of the nail. I use the tip of the nail for this. And I also don't worry about hitting all 4 strings on this. You don't necessarily have to if you only hit the inner strings. No one's going to notice, and it's also going to give that nice soft light sound. Listen to the difference if I try to use the plane of motion to go all the way through all 4 strings. It's very loud and very bulky sounding, but if we use just a little bit and make the plane of motion very tiny so we try to stay on the inner strings, it's a much more sensitive sound and sounds a little bit something like this. The big key to this one is keeping that wrist nice and loose, which is honestly something we should always be doing on the instrument anyway. So let's try this same exact harmonic vehicle from Lo Que Lane, but now utilizing the index finger triple as opposed to the thumb triple. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So for our last variation in the triplet, I'm going to show you something called the Cascade Triple. Now this is something you might not have played before, and let's talk first about the accents that it has before we actually break down what this sounds like and how to play it. So if we go back to the thumb roll triple, remember that our downbeat accent is the first beat of the triplet itself. We come down with the nail. And then with the index finger triple, we're actually accenting the first and last beat of the triplet because we're using our fingernail for that as opposed to a pad of the finger. And thus the index finger triple can actually be used rather well in swing style music as well. If we think back to our swung 8th note, and I'll link to a video in the description here describing the rhythmic concept that is the swung 8th note, we're really using the outer notes of a triplet. So that is exactly what our index finger triplet is naturally doing for us. So it has a space in that context as well as in waltzes and other things. We just end up with that up strum, that softer next downbeat that we need to keep in mind. Now with the Cascade Triple, we're actually going to accent the first 2 notes of the triplet and have a soft 3rd note. And the reason that we're doing this is to create a different texture. This triplet is not as precise. It does not have this stark front to the note, and I'll show you why. It is in fact 3 downstrokes in a row. So as we do this up to speed, the 3 downstrokes tend to run into each other, and that gives us the cascading sort of sound. So this is what it'll sound like. So we can hear the difference. It's not as rhythmically precise, but opens up the sound and allows it to sort of sound a little bit like a waterfall going off an edge here. So how do we do this? We're going to maintain that down wrist motion, but all 3 notes are going to come from our down strum. So we're going to come first, we're going to flick out with the middle finger and hit the nail, followed by the first finger and then the thumb. So very slowly we have middle, first, thumb. So you can see it, the middle finger, thumb, and first finger tend to run into each other. We never get one all the way through the strings before we get to the other. And that gives us this textural change of sound. And much like the index finger triple, also sets us up for an up strum on the next beat, which can work very well in a waltz, such as Lo Que Lane. So let's listen to this together, and I'm just going to play the chords and leave out the melody this time. Now let's try that together. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. First of all, thank you so much for making it this far in the video. And since you've made it this far, you get my last little tip, which a lot of people I think forget about. We always think of a triple stroke as needing to be utilized as an 8th note or 16th note or quarter note triplet. But we can use it in any rhythm context that we want. It doesn't really matter. We can use this, I love using this, especially in waltzes. You can use a thumb roll triple as every downbeat. 1, 2, 3. And again, it gives us those nice accents on the downbeat without us having to think about actually strumming harder through anything. And this can also be used in 4/4 patterns. It doesn't matter if we look at something such as 12th Street Rag, which is really a grouping of 3 notes in the melody. It seems to be kind of a perfect place to use a triple stroke in here. So instead of going, we could go. We have the same exact rhythm, but again, we're playing with where all of those accents are placed. And that's really the goal of learning all these different techniques, is to set ourselves up for what the next strum is. Do we want a down strum or an up strum next? And thus, which triplet pattern will we need to use to facilitate that? But also, where are we going to place the accents? We've looked a lot at George Formby repertoire here, and he played a lot with displacing the accents using triplets through the shake in the middle of his split stroke patterns, creating this syncopated feel. So how can we do this ourselves? And that is really the question I want you to think about this week. I'll see you all soon.